welcome to this first lecture. So I will introduce you forecasting and more particularly point forecasting. This lecture is aims for you to try to understand the basics of forecasting. You will not become an expert of forecasting in just only 2 lectures, but you do not need to be an expert. You just need to know some basics of forecasting, because in fact, it is almost used in every area, economics, energy, and so on. You always perform some forecasts to provide some information for decision makers. Because decision makers, so politics, but not only politics, when you are in a company, you are a decision maker, you own a company, you need to make decisions. And so you need some information to make your decision. And most of the time you use forecast to make your decision. Okay, so let's dive into this topic. So first question, could you define forecasting? Do you have any idea about what it is? Yes? Can you speak?
Yeah, trying to find where we could be with the data that we have now.
Okay, yes, that could be one definition. So where we could be, so it's an assumption, but yes, this is the purpose of forecasting, because we are not an oracle, so we cannot know for sure the future, but based on some information, some knowledge, we would like to know how it could be. So for instance, electricity prices, gas prices, as you know, they are soaring up. So maybe this is the situation of today, but how will it be tomorrow and so on? Okay, good definitions. So yes, based on the information available in the present, judging, estimating what is likely to happen in the future. Forecast is not a true knowledge. It's a guess. It's a guess, but we will try to make smart guess, of course. So the learning objective of this lecture are mainly this one. First, understand the context of forecasting with application to renewable energy. Because of course, I will not teach you how to forecast some variable in economics and so on, because we are here in the micro course. But most of the techniques that you will learn through this lecture, you can use them in other topics or areas, so for instance, economics and so on. But we will anyway focus on energy forecasting. Then you will learn to produce deterministic forecasts and perform verification of deterministic forecast. Because, okay, it's great to be able to compute forecasts, but if you do not know if they are reliable or not, it is useless. So today you will see that, and for the next lecture, we will focus on probabilistic forecasting. Okay? So let's start with the forecasting context. Do you have any idea why do we use forecasts? Hello? You can come. Microread lesson?
Yeah.
Microread lesson?
Yes.
Just come. This is here. This is the place to be. Maybe not the carry, but sorry. Okay. So do you have any idea why do we use forecasts? Yes.
To make decisions.
Okay, to make decisions. And in daily life, do you use forecasts? Yes. Yes, weather forecast. I think everybody here has already used weather forecasts. And if you have a chappie, for instance, you know what kind of habits you will wear. But it's not the same if it is a sunny day or a cloudy day, because then you will come back. So you have to think about it. Okay, so of course, weather forecast. Another example? Economics, yes. Yes, okay, yes. I know what you mean. But yes, yes, for instance. And if we come back to the topic of today, so microread, energy market, and so on, do you have any idea why we could use some forecasts in that field? In energy? In the energy field? Do you know some example? No, not at all? I am sure you know. Yes?
In energy markets, you have to announce how many megawatts you're going to produce the
Yes.
next day.
Yes. Yes. For instance, energy supplier, they are balancing responsible party. So it means that they have to nominate their position on the market to the TSO, transmission system operator. So it means that they have some consumer. So we are some consumer of energy supplier, and they need to supply energy for us. And so they need to forecast our demand to the TSO because they are balancing responsible party. It is a legal obligation. Otherwise, they will have to pay some fine. So they need to forecast our electricity consumption. Okay, so this is one example. Do you have any other example in energy? So some of you are in the energy market lessons, so I am pretty sure that you know a lot of other examples.
For the storage, it's
Storage?
yes, it's a combination of weather condition and energy pollution. So we have to know if we can store water in them, or if we have to release the water.
Okay.
There will be too much.
Okay. Yes. Yes, it's true. Also, yes. Yes. And what do you think about prices? Do you think that it could be of some interest to forecast prices? Yes, probably too. Okay. So yes, anyway, so forecasting is a natural step to decision making. If you do not base your decision on some information, I think you are a fool. So you always base your decision on some information, and most of the time you use forecast because you do not know the future. So believing we know what will happen helps to make decision, but mainly it makes us more confident about it. Because it's one thing to take a decision. Okay, you can take a decision, but are you very confident about that decision? The more information you have, the more confident you will be. So forecast, you can use them also to be more confident about a decision. And so there are many key areas where you can use forecast. So of course, in energy, but also finance, economic, and so on, weather and climate, and so on. So a small reminder about the energy key market player. So sorry for the student that attends the lesson that I gave in the energy market lesson, but for the other one. So you have the energy producer. So you can have a coal power plant, a gas power plant, a nuclear power plant, a wind farm, and so on. So they all produce energy. So for instance, in this case, it is electricity. The electricity goes to the grid. So you have the main grid with the TSOs and DSO, and then you supply the consumer, small and large. And you have the middleman, so the energy supplier, where you can buy electricity. So when you are a consumer, you buy electricity from an energy supplier, and thanks to the energy supplier, it buys energy on the energy market or directly to the producer. So here are the energy flows. Here you have the energy market. It's only a smaller reminder. And so based on that figure, what do you think about the key variable to forecast in the energy market player? So you already mentioned to balance the perimeter, so to forecast the energy demand. So that's true. If you are an energy supplier, you want to supply the consumer, so you need to forecast to supply. But here you have also the producer. So what do you think about them? Yes?
For example, for renewable energy sources, you have to forecast how much they will be able to afford in terms of quantity.
Yes, of course. Renewable energy, they are uncertain by nature. It's like that. So as they are uncertain, you do not know in advance how much energy they will produce. When you have a gas power plant or a coal power plant, nuclear power plant, you press a button. It's a little bit more complex than that, but if we make a simple picture, you press a button and it will produce energy. So you can in advance say, okay, I will produce energy at this amount of energy for this hour. You cannot do that with renewable energy. So you need to forecast. So, okay. Producer, consumer. So we make forecasts for consumption. We make forecasts for production. What do you think about the market? So you have the prices, they are fluctuating. So we also, yes? Sorry?
The demand.
The demand? So consumption is the demand. Okay. But for the energy market, of course, you are also interested in forecasting the electricity or gas or any other energy prices. It's in fact also a key variable in the energy market. So you have different needs for each participant. If you are an energy supplier, you are interested in forecasting the electric load, of course, because you have a legal obligation to balance your perimeter. But also the TSO and DSO. They need to know in advance the load because they need to balance the grid at the country level. Otherwise, it is a blackout. But you can also forecast the day-ahead prices. For instance, when you're an energy supplier, it is very interesting to try to make a good estimate of the day-ahead prices. But also the imbalance volume and prices when you're an energy supplier, but also TSO. You can also try to forecast a potential congestion on the line. You can also try to forecast the generation and so on and so on. And nearly all of these quantities, they are driven by weather and climate. Because for the production, which is here, from renewable energy, of course, it is driven by the weather. And as the production will drive also the prices will be driven also by the weather. And the consumption is the same. We consume more energy in the winter, for instance, for heating in our home. So of course, it is related to the weather. And it is the same between the sun. If the sun is, if we have a very beautiful day, for instance, or if it is a cloudy day, it will not be the same in terms of consumption for electricity, for the light, for instance, or for something, or for a lot of things. So in fact, you will see that most of the time when we try to make forecasts of each one of these variables, we will use some weather forecast. Okay, so if we come back to the first picture, from the producer side, so what do we want to do as a producer? We would like to sell our energy. We would like to make some profit based on our production. So of course, we would like to optimize benefit from generation. We would like to optimize our profit from generation. So to do that, we will try to forecast our production, to sell our production at the best price on the energy market or to an energy supplier. If we are an energy supplier, we need to optimize the benefits by selling energy to the consumer. So it is we need also to forecast the consumption, but also the production that we need to buy. When we are TSO, we need to balance the grid, so we need also to balance the production and the consumption, so we need to forecast them. When we are on the energy market, we like to optimize transaction. If you want to optimize transaction, you need to make some decision based on some forecast of production and consumption. And so on. It is the same for instance, if you are a very big, large industrial consumer, for instance, I think you know Solvay. Do you know Solvay? Which is one of the main chemical industry in Belgium and also in the world. And so Solvay, if you look at the consumption in terms of energy of Solvay, it's unbelievable. They consume several terawatt of energy per year because they have a lot of very big industry and they need a lot of energy for the chemical processes. So for them, energy is not just a small amount of euro in the bill. It's not the same for us. We pay maybe 1,000 or 2,000 euro per year in terms of energy bill. For them, it's like hundreds of millions of euros. So they really need to optimize their energy consumption. And so to do that, they need also to buy energy at the best price. So for Solvay, for instance, Solvay has its own trading floor just for energy. They have their own trading floor. Imagine that they have a whole team, an entire team that are just specialized in energy market to buy energy at the best price. And at the beginning, they are just a chemical company. But they have their own trading floor because for them, it's like, you cannot imagine how much energy they use. You have a question?
If there are a lot of company that in the how they
Solvay?
Yes.
Solvay is one of the biggest. But of course, I think that you already know that in Belgium, we have a lot of very big industrial companies, but Solvay is really a big one. And do you know why we have so many big companies here in Belgium? You have any idea why? Because Belgium is a small country, so why they are all there?
The European organization and the GFC.
And the North Sea?
That's near the sea.
The what?
So in Belgium, we have a coast.
Yes, yes.
Like 200 kilometers.
Yes. So proximity of the sea.
Yes.
Okay, so in fact, it's different things. So yes, Belgium is a little bit at the center of the European megalopole, so it's true. And also we have a direct access to a main port, Anvers, which is one of the biggest ports in Europe. So it's very useful when you need to import gas and so on. And also we have a very fine grids for gas because we have the Netherlands, we have France, and we have Germany. And so we have a lot of pipes for gas where the gas can go from one country to another one. So in fact, Belgium, it's a very nice place when you're a big company because you have direct access to a lot of things. So to a lot of energy.
Is it still true as the Netherlands stopped to send gas?
They didn't stop just today.
Just today?
No, it will take some time. But if you look at from an historical perspective, it's a decision that they have taken maybe a few years ago. But when they began to install this big company, it was like 50 years ago. So it was a different choice. But anyway, you have the big port of Anvers that will you can import a lot of energy. Okay, it was a small digression. Do you know some decision-making problem in the energy sector? So we come back to the microgrid course, and I think that you have already seen some energy problem related to microgrids.
The balance between the consumption and the production.
Yes, at the microgrid level, of course. So yes, you can balance the energy at the country level when you are TSO, but if you look at the microgrid, it's the same thing, but at a smaller scale. So of course, you need to balance your consumption and your production. Sorry?
Yes.
Yes. And so this is a decision-making problem because you are on a day-ahead basis. And so you need to balance your consumption of tomorrow. So how do you do that? Oh, sun tomorrow? No, it doesn't work like that. So you need to be a little bit more smarter than that. So forecast can be used as input to numerous decision-making problems. So for instance, a definition of reserve requirements. So if you need, for instance, a backup capacity for when you are a system operator, but for a microgrid could be if you need, for instance, some backup capacity. If you can use some generator if you don't have any sun and you cannot rely on some PV production. And if, for instance, if you are an hospital or something, you cannot say to the people, no, we cannot treat you because you have no more sun. It's finished. Come back to home. No, so you need some backup capacity. But so you can also have, for instance, a unit commitment and economic dispatch. So you have several production units, PV, wind farm, diesel generator, and so on. And you would like to select the optimal production unit based on some information. Sometimes, if you have a lot of sun, maybe it will be optimal to use just PV. And if you do have, we are in other weather condition, maybe you need some other way of producing energy. But also you could have, for instance, a coordination renewable with storage. When can you store energy? When do you need to store energy? If you have, for instance, an electric car, when do you charge your electric car? At night, during the day? It depends of a lot of variables. Right. For instance, also the design of optimal trading strategy, electricity market clearing, optimal maintenance planning, and so on and so on and so on. For instance, please, can you will discuss later? For instance, if you are a nuclear reactor, when do you shut down your reactor to perform maintenance? When do you do that? Do you have any idea when we shut down a reactor for maintenance? In summer? Do you have any? Can you explain why?
Because there are a lot of sun. Why? So we need less energy.
Okay.
And there are less energy.
Yes, true, both. So yes, it's true that in northern country, in summer, we consume less than in winter because, of course, in winter it's colder, of course. But for instance, if you go to south country, in the summer, you consume a lot of electricity. But yes, it is true. So in Belgium, we are more or less in the northern part of the country in Europe. And so we would like to shut down nuclear reactor during summer instead of winter. But sometimes you have to shut down a reactor for safety reasons, and this is what happened a few years ago in Belgium in 2015. And there were some nuclear reactors that were shut down during winter. It was a big issue. And in France, it was also a problem. It was quite difficult. So optimal maintenance planning, you need some forecast to do that. Because yes, I talk about the weather, but for optimal maintenance planning, you need also men and people to perform the maintenance. So you need to forecast the availability on some teams that are specialized in a certain way of doing maintenance. For instance, for nuclear power plants, you cannot ask to anybody to say, I'll come back, you will help me to maintain the reactor. It doesn't work like that. There are a specific number of people that are able to do that. So you cannot shut down all of your nuclear reactors at the same time. You need to make a planning. And so you need to forecast in advance how many people you will have at each time to make your maintenance for your nuclear reactor. And so, for instance, for nuclear reactor, it is really a big issue to know in advance the maintenance planning. It's like you cannot imagine it's a nightmare for the nuclear producer. For instance, in France, EDF, which has 56 nuclear power plants running, so 56, they need to build a maintenance planning because each year, for each one of these nuclear reactors, they need to shut down to put some new fuel, uranium fuel into the reactor. So they need to make an optimal decision for each of these nuclear reactors. And so they have a maintenance planning of 10 years ahead, 10 years ahead. And so it's an optimal planning of 10 years. And so you have a lot of data center and computers that are working just on optimal maintenance planning. And so they rely on forecast to do that. Okay. So that was for the context. Do you know the different types of forecasts? Bertrand introduced a little bit that topic at the beginning when he was presenting both lectures. So today we have a first lecture on a specific type of forecast and the next lecture on another specific type of forecast. Do you know what it could be? You try to remember?
You talk about probabilistic.
Sorry?
You talk about probabilistic forecast.
Yes, yes.
And I don't know the other part.
Yes, yes. So deterministic as opposed to probabilistic. It's not the same thing. And so then in deterministic forecast is like point forecast, we will see what it is. And then in probabilistic forecast, we have a lot of various types of probabilistic forecasts. So there are many different types of forecasts, so many types of information that you can produce based on some knowledge of the data. So, and all of these types of forecasts, they can be used as input to decision making. So we have deterministic forecast. This is the topic of today. Then you have probabilistic forecast. It will be the topic of the next lecture. But in probabilistic forecast, you have a lot of various types of probabilistic forecasts. So you have, for instance, quantized, intervals, but you have also scenarios, or you can have risk indices, density, and so on. You have a very long list of types of forecasts. Today we focus on the deterministic forecast, and on the next lecture we'll see some of them. Okay. So what is a microgrid? What is an energy management system? I think you already know that, but can you remind me, because I am not up to date about that. I think you have already seen that maybe in the first or second lecture of this course. How could you define a microgrid? This is your course. Microgrid. So how could you define a microgrid with simple words?
Microgrid.
Yes.
It's a small electrical grid.
So it's a small electrical grid. Okay. Why not? Okay. Micro, small. Okay. And then, but okay, good start. Then we'll try to elaborate a little bit. What do you have into a microgrid? What can you find in terms of device?
Source and load.
Yes. So the loads. Yes, yes. So some production device, some load device, and so on. Okay, okay. Okay. And they are interconnected at a small level. Okay. And do you know what is an energy management system? No? No idea? So the energy management system, it is a system that will try to optimize the decision in terms of energy. So here we have a schematic of a microgrid. So this is what you just said. So most of the time it's a small grid. And you have, for instance, a production device. You can have a genset, you can have a wind turbine, PV, and so on. You can have some storage systems. You have also some load. And most of the time you are connected to the grid, but you can also be off grid. Depends the way you want to function. And then you have an energy management system, and the energy management system is not a physical device. It's like an algorithm. It's an algorithm that we try to optimize the decision based on what? On monitoring. So each time you monitor your production, your consumption is on, and also on forecasting. So based on actual, very recent information that come from the monitoring and from some information in the future, so the forecast, you will take some decision. This is the energy management system. So if you want to produce forecast, it just like that, it is for decision making. And most of the time you give your forecast to an energy management system. And so here you have a reminder of an energy management system. You have a specific module for monitoring that its goal is just to monitor. Most of the time when you are doing forecasting, you use also the last information from the present, but you can use also extra information, for instance, like weather forecast and so on. Then you forecast, and you give your forecast to an operational planning module, and so on. And this information can go to real-time control and so on. So an energy management system, it's like a combination of several modules that will do the job to optimize the energy for the entire macro data. And we will focus just on the forecasting module. But through this entire course with Bertrand, you will see also how to take optimal decisions. So you will learn how to solve a linear problem, for instance. And so you can take to compute optimal decision. And I think you will also see sizing. And the sizing, it's approximately the same. You solve an optimal linear problem to try to build the optimal system. Okay, so but we will focus on forecasting. And if you look at the EMS timeline, so just imagine right now we are trying to optimize the energy of the microgrid. So we need to take some decision. So you have a forecasting module, and for instance, your forecasting module, each quarter, it will produce a new forecast. So each quarter, based on new information, it produces a forecast. And so it provides this new information forecast to the operational planning. And the operational planning will optimize decision for the microgrid, for instance, for the next 15 minutes. So it's a plan. And then in real time, you have another module, the real-time optimization module, and it optimizes the operation, but for a shorter scale of time, like 50 seconds or a few seconds. And so it is like a real-time module that takes very real-time decisions. So every 5 seconds, it takes a new decision, and so on, and so on, so on, so on, based on the planning of the operational planning. And so each 15 minutes, you refresh your operational planning based on the forecast, and you have through these 15 minutes, your real-time optimization module that takes real-time decisions. So this is an energy management system. Okay, what could be the key micro variable to forecast? So generation, if you have PV, wind power, hydraulic power, whatever. Consumption, it depends if you are, for instance, here at the university or in an industrial process and so on, but also prices, electricity, gas, and so on. Okay. There are different ways to classify forecasts because it's not the same thing to perform the forecast in on a daily basis, for instance, that 1 year ahead. It's not the same thing. So you have different types of techniques to do that. If you look at on a short time scale, so from the seconds to the hour or seconds to the day, it is called a short-term forecasting because it's a short-term scale. And then you can make forecasts from the week or days from the week to a year, to a month, or to a decade. And most of the time, for example, if you are performing hour ahead scheduling, day ahead scheduling, you will use a very short-term forecast because you need to know the last information. And so you need very accurate forecast on a short time scale. So for example, if you want to forecast the day-ahead prices on the electricity market, you will use day-ahead forecast. You do not need to forecast the weather or I don't know, the load or the production 1 year ahead if you just take a decision for tomorrow. It's logic. But if you want to make the system planning or to build a new energy policy, so for instance, right now, Belgium or Europe, they are building new energy policy to try to meet the IPCC target. So they want to cut off the greenhouse gas emission. And so they have targets in 30 or 50 years. So by the end of 2050, for instance, then it is completely different. So you would like to put in place a new energy policy to drive your emissions. And so you need some forecast also of the demand, of the electrical demand of all Belgium or of Europe. But it will not be the same forecast of the demand that you use, for instance, on a daily basis when you are the TSO. So depending on your application, you do not use the same forecast and the same technique. And we will focus more on the day-ahead forecast here in this course. Okay. So you have the time dimension and the forecasting horizon. You want to forecast maybe your consumption from a few minutes ahead to a day. But sometimes you will forecast your consumption from a day to a week, or from a week to a year, or from 1 year to 10 years. And that you have also the resolutions. If you want to, you can forecast your consumptions, but what is the time resolution of your forecast? Do you need a point every hour or every 2 hours or every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes? It's not the same. This is called the forecasting resolution. So this is the time dimension. And you have also the spatial dimension. So it's not the same thing to forecast the consumption or the production if you consider a microgrid or to consider the transportation grid. It's not the same. It's not the same level. So this is called the spatial resolution. So you could build a classification and your forecast into dimension with here the spatial dimension and here the time dimension. And here you have very short-term forecast, short-term forecast, middle-term forecast, long-term forecast. Here you have very small system, middle system, large system. And for each part of this classification, we will have different techniques to achieve the best forecast. And we will focus more on forecasts which should be there. So short-term forecasting apply to very small system, microgrids. Okay. Do you have any idea about what kind of data we would like to use for our forecasting model? So imagine we consider a microgrid, and we would like to perform the forecast of the consumption of that microgrid or the production of that microgrid on a daily basis. Do you have any idea of what kind of data we could use? I think you know. I am pretty sure you know. How do behave the consumption, electrical consumption or the gas consumption? On what it depends?
Hour of the day.
Yes, the hour of the day. Not the same at night or in the evening, in the morning. Yes. The temperature. So the hour of the day or the temperature would be very good candidates to be used as input of our forecasting model. Of course. So yes, and mainly we will for the consumption, mainly we will use temperature and the hour of the day, but also the day of the week. Weekend and not weekend. It's not the same. Here at the university, I assume you are not there on Saturday and Sunday. I hope for you. You could be there, it's your choice, but I hope for you that you do something else. So the electrical consumption at the university will be very different between a Monday or a Sunday. And really, it's striking. If you look at a graph of the electrical consumption, you will see all the day of the week like that and the weekend. And it's the same for a lot of companies. Most of the company people do not work during the weekend. There are some company, and so for example, for industrial process, you always need some people to be there. But most of the companies, people, they come back to their home during the weekend. And between day and night also. Most of the people, they work during the day. So you can see that on the electric consumption also. So of course, we will use calendar information. Calendar information is like hour of the day, day of the week, but also month of the year. Not the same, December is not the same as August. We have not the same consumption profile. And so also weather variables such as temperature for the consumption, electrical consumption. But if you have PV production, of course, you will use the solar irradiation. So today it's like it's a little bit sunny, so it's fine for PV production. So, but you will also use, for instance, if you have a wind power plant, it will be the wind speed. So most of the time you use weather variables, but with warning, it depends on the forecasting problem, of course. If you have a PV production or wind farms, it's the same weather variables. So temperature, solar irradiation, wind speed, rainfall, and so on. And you also calendar variables. And sometimes you can even try to build cross effect, like you can multiply temperature by a calendar variable and so on. You can do a lot of combination of variables and give them as input to your forecasting model. But just remember weather variables and calendar variable, it's already a good start. So now let's focus on deterministic forecast. So we are here at time t. So this is the knowledge that we have acquired. So for instance, we have monitored our electrical consumption of the microgrid. So we know the consumption up to time t. And we would like to forecast the electrical consumption of the microgrid at time t plus k. So for instance, in 2 hours. Okay. So we're interested in what will happen at time t plus k. And k is referred to as the lead time or the forecasting horizon. If k is equal to 1 day, most of the time we say we are performing forecast on a day-ahead basis for 1 day ahead, 1 day ahead. And so this is a random variable, for instance, the power generation or the consumption. Now, what could be a deterministic forecast? Do you have any idea what could it be, a deterministic forecast? What does it mean, deterministic? What is a deterministic process?
Deterministic process where an action that we take at a given, I mean, at one moment have an impact to all of the environment.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, there is a relation between an action and the whole of the system.
Is it more causality that you are describing now? Because the deterministic process or stochastic process, if you do something right now, it will have an impact in the future, in both cases. Any other idea? Deterministic, what does it mean, a deterministic process, as opposed to a stochastic process? Did you have statistical lectures on some? Yeah. So you know what is a deterministic process, no? No, it's a wipeout. No, now we are masters, so bachelor. No, I don't know anything about statistics. So no idea, deterministic, yes?
That's when we are in the states. Now we know exactly by doing solution what we do.
Okay. Yeah, but in the stochastic process, it's the action now have an impact. You mean, yes, when we will make our prediction, we know everything about the next step. Yeah, it's a little bit closer. So yes, we are. Yes, okay, yes, okay. Let's say that is that. So, what is a deterministic forecast? The deterministic forecast, it's an estimate for time t plus k, because it's always an estimate. It's not the reality. It's a guess, conditional to some information. So we know some information up to time t. We use that information. So it's an estimate conditional to some information. And the point forecast and from the conditional expectation, for example, power generation of the demand. And so if we have a look at our stochastic variable, it's like if you could take the expectancy of that stochastic variable. And so basically it will produce some point. So if you have a guess for the electrical consumption for the sleep time, it's a guess, it's a point. So as you said, it's like if you know all the state of the system for that lead time. So for electrical consumption, it will be a point. You guess it will be 100 kilowatts. It's a point. As opposed to a probabilistic forecast, because in a probabilistic forecast, you will not say, okay, I estimate that the production will be of 100 kilowatts, but maybe you will say, I think that the production will be maybe between 50 kilowatts and 150 kilowatts. So an interval. It's not the same that saying, I think it will be 100 kilowatts. You know the difference? You see the difference? So deterministic forecast, it's a way of performing forecasts. So it's a way of modeling the stochastic variable, in fact. Because the production or the consumption, they are always stochastic variable. But when you are performing deterministic forecast, it means that you are trying to forecast the expectancy of that stochastic variable. So you are interested in producing points, point estimates. So point forecast. So most of the time we are saying point forecast for deterministic forecast. So we use some information. We have a lot of information with a forecast and the variable and so on. We use a model. We'll see the model after, but so we need a model to make the forecast. And so that model has some parameters, and it will produce point forecast. So it will produce the expectancy of that random variable for some times. So remember that. And G, which is a model, you can use a machine learning model. So for instance, neural network, random boosting, I don't know, support vector machine, and so on. A lot of very nice technique. But you can also use a parametric model because, for instance, for PV production, you know the physical law of the PV production. And so most of the time it is you take the irradiation, the square of the irradiation, and the irradiation times the temperature. And so if you know the solar irradiation, the temperature, you can say, okay, my production will be up to that level. So you can use parametric model, or you can use statistical model. Based on some statistic or historical value, you will have some guess. Did you follow some lessons about machine learning? No? Yeah. Introduction to machine learning?
Yes.
Okay. And deep learning, no? With Gilles Loup. And did you? I think it will be for the next semester, maybe. I think you will give this lesson. No, you are not. You will not attend this lesson. C'est quoi comme master? C'est électrique ou méca là?
Les deux.
Les deux. Les deux. Okay.
Par week, c'est.
Okay. And so you will not follow a deep learning lesson or? No, okay. Because it's for me for the next lecture. So you can use different models to perform forecasts. So let's see an example. So for instance, it is a case study with a PV generation. And so I think it should be the PV generation of the yes, it is the PV generation of the university parking rooftop. You see, we have some PV panel of the rooftop here. And so we monitor the PV production of that PV panel, and I'll try to use some machine learning model to try to forecast that PV production by using the weather forecast of Xavier Feldweis, which is a climatologist here at the University of Liège. Xavier Feldweis is the one who comes for the Sustainable and Challenges lecture about climate change. And so in red, you have the observation, so the true realization of the PV production here of the parking rooftops. And in black, you have the model. And DAD means day ahead, in 24 hours. It means that I use a model that tries to forecast the PV production 1 day in advance on a day ahead basis. Okay. So for instance, each day, it compute forecast for the day after, for the entire day. One shot. And so each day I forecast the day after, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so here it is a specific day. I cannot remember which one. You have 2 specific days, sorry. And so, for instance, if you look at this day, so it was here a little bit cloudy during the day because the production is almost equal to 0. And you see that the model was not able to forecast that. So it forecasts this curve, and here you see the very big errors. And here it was a sunny day because it is the most maximum expected capacity is here. And here you can see that the model was not so bad. It follows quite well the observation. But here it was not able to forecast, in fact, the clouds. You can have a look at the study if you want, just to give you an example. And so for this case, I use as information some weather forecast. So I use solar irradiation and air temperature, which are the main driver of PV production. And so I use some neural networks. I train the neural networks on a data set by using a weather forecast, and I was able to compute this point forecast. You cannot see, in fact, that they are point forecasts, it's just that I draw some line between the points. But in fact, you have a point here, you have 96 quarters per day, because we have 24 hours per day, and we have 4 quarters per hour, so 96 quarters per day. And in fact, you have 96 points. So they are point forecasts. Each day I compute 96 points for the next day, but I draw some lines between the point, but here and here, they are 2 points. It's just the line that goes through. Okay. Do you want a small break? Why not? Let's say 10 minutes. Is it okay? So let's come back to forecasting. So we have seen the forecasting context and how to classify some forecasts, and then the definition of a deterministic forecast or point forecast. And now we'll see some sources of error of point forecasting. And then we will see how to perform a verification of your forecast, because it's very important when you produce a forecast to have some indicators or some ways of assessing your point forecast to know if they are good or bad, because if you use them in your decision-making process, and if you use crop forecast, you will not take good decisions. So depending on the forecasting horizon, means if you want to forecast 1 day ahead, 1 week ahead, 1 month ahead, and so on. What, in your opinion, what could be the origins of the forecasting errors? And what is the main forecasting error driver between weather forecast and recent observation? So here you have maybe some answer to that question. And for this question, it's to understand, in your opinion, between the weather forecast and the observation, what could be the main driver of error? So if you come back to the first question, what could be the origins of the forecasting error? In your opinion. We have some guess here. The second question. It is the data we use as input of the model. So if we use crop data. So imagine I would like to forecast the electrical consumption of my microgrid. I use weather forecast and I use recent observation. And after that, I compare my forecast to the observation, and we have some errors. In your opinion, what could be the origin of these errors?
Error made in the weather forecast.
Of course. If the weather forecast is not good, at the end, my forecast will not be good. Yes, of course. And the same for the observation. Maybe my monitoring module has some issue. I don't know. I use some information, but I do not know the quality of that information. In fact. So if that information is not reliable, probably my forecast at the end will not be reliable. It's the same when you are at university and where you listen to the gossip. You know? If your gossip is not reliable, you will not know what is happening between people. It's the same thing. And then, depending on the forecasting horizon, what does it mean? So if I want to perform a forecast 1 day ahead or 7 days ahead, in your opinion, between weather forecast or recent observation, what could be the main driver of error? Do you think it will depend? So if I perform very short-term forecast for the next hour, do you think the weather forecast will have a very an important impact at the end, or maybe it will be more the observation that I just made? Observation, yes. And if I compute a point forecast for electrical consumption in 1 week, probably the observation of electrical consumption right now will not have a deep impact, but it's logical. Okay? Just to give you some insight. So to generate renewable energy forecast, we use most of the time recent measurements, so of renewable power generation or so on. We use also weather forecast and sometimes extra information like calendar or I don't know, offsite measurement and so on. But most of the time we just use weather forecast and measurements. And relative important at the end of the model depends on the lead time, because here you have the lead time, so the forecasting horizon, and here you have the error of your forecast, for instance, in percentage at the end, and you can see the importance of the error. And so for very short-term forecasts, like 1 hour ahead or 6 hours ahead, most of the time your error is driven by the measurements. If you have very bad measurements, it will have a deep impact on the model. And if it is like 1 day, 2 days, or one week ahead, most of the time it will be the weather forecast that will be very important. If your weather forecast is not reliable, your model will not be reliable. So even if you have very good measurements, and if you perform a forecast in 1 week, if your weather forecast is not good, it is useless. Okay. And so this is to give you some insight about the data that you use when you perform point forecasting. So if you want to make some very reliable forecast in 1 week, be careful about the weather forecast. Here, for instance, it is an example of some weather forecast generated by the regional climate model from the Liège University. And here you have a map of Belgium. Okay? This is Belgium. And so this is a map in terms of, I think, temperature. So like 36 degrees Celsius and minus 24. And here you have a map of forecast for the temperature at 2 meters from the ground. And so this model can compute a lot of weather forecasts for Belgium, and it is always running. It is produced by the Laboratory of Climatology here at Liège University. And if you click on the link, you can go to the website. So here you have weather forecast. And so, for instance, you have some animation. Go. So this is the animation. So here it is today, and then each hour it is refreshed, and you have like that the weather prediction for all Belgium, like 7 days ahead. And so each hour you have a new prediction, and the model is always running here at the Laboratory of Climatology. So here it is for the temperature, but you have also for the sun, you have the clouds, you have the snow, you have the precipitation, and so on. So you have a lot of information. And these information are free, because most of the time you have to pay for weather forecast. And it is very expensive to have a very good weather forecast. So we are lucky to have that at the university. And so you can use that into your model. And in fact, for the assignment, you will use some data from that model. Okay. So you have the weather forecast as a potential source of error, but sometimes the error comes directly from other ways. And consider wind power turbines. I probably already know that the law of production for wind power turbine is directly related to the wind speed, and in fact, it is related to the cube of the wind speed. Okay, so imagine you use a weather forecast of the wind speed, and if your weather forecast is perfect, you will have a perfect prediction of the wind power, just the cube of the wind speed. So just a simple mathematical operation. But if you make an error, imagine a 10% error on your wind speed, it will not have the same impact if you are a small speed, or like here at 20 or at 10. Because as you take the cube, here it will dampen the error, and here it will amplify the error. So depending on the generation process, your weather forecast will not have the same impact. And so here, for instance, for wind production, you know that if you have a very high wind speed, you need very high reliable wind speed forecast, because with the cube law, it will amplify your error. And for the PV production, it will be a different physical law, so it's not the same logic. Okay. So now let's go to the final topic for today, the verification. So consider a case study. So the PV parking rooftops here from Liège University. So we have an PV installation of 466.4 kilowatts. So it's not so bad. And so we can have the data. So I retrieve some data from this PV installation. And so I use some deep learning model to try to make point forecast of that PV production. And so the forecasting model is a feed-forward neural network with one hidden layer. And I use weather forecast of solar irradiation and air temperature as inputs. And I performed day-led forecast, point forecast, for an entire day on a quarterly basis. So it means 1 point each quarter. So 96 points per day. So the model forecast 96 points per day. So each day it forecasts a new set of 96 points. And it is implemented in Python using the TensorFlow library. So forecasting is about predicting future events in new situation, not explaining what happened in the past. And we need to verify forecasts on the data that are not used for the modeling. So this is very important before performing a forecast to consider which evaluation methodology you will use. I think this one you cannot answer because if you have not already follow a machine learning course, it's impossible to know. So I will go straight to the answer. So a good practice in machine learning is so you have a data set. Imagine you have a data set for instance, 2 years of PV production here of the PV parking roster. So you have 2 years of production. So a good practice is to divide your data set in several parts. And so you divide your data set in 3 parts. You have a training part, you have a validation part, and you have a testing part. Okay, remember that. So you have 3 parts. You take your 2 years of data and you divide your data set into 3 parts. And most of the time, it is better to do that randomly. So for instance, you pick one day there, one day there, one day there, and you build the learning set and so on and so on. But at the end, you have 3 different parts. The training part will be only used to train the model. So you use that part of data to train your model. Okay, so you train your model, it will learn on that part. Once it is trained, okay, you will use the validation part to try to optimize the hyperparameters of the model. Because your model will have some parameters and you can tune the parameters of the model. And by tuning the parameter of the model, you will see it will not have the same, it will not produce the same forecast. Okay, and so you train your model, and on the validation part, where the model has not been trained, you compute the score. So you perform forecasts on the validation part, and you compare to the observation. You compute some score. Okay, score A, B, C. Okay, okay. I will try to do better. You come back to the training part. You tune a little bit your parameter. You train again your model, and you come back to the validation part. And once again, you perform a new forecast, and so on and so on. It's an iterative process. Sometimes you even try to rewrite your code because there was a bug, maybe, I don't know. But so you do an iterative process, and once you think that you reach a good hyperparameter, you will see that on your validation part, the scores are not very improving. Okay? So you have selected, you think, the best hyperparameter of your model. Okay? So you stop there. And now you take the testing part that you have never used before. So it has not been used. And now you make a forecast on the testing set and you compute your final score. This is where you will use the final score, not here. And you will see that the scores are not the same. Because here, in fact, you have biased your model. Because you have used this part a lot to try to optimize the hyperparameter. So in a way, the model has been selected, the hyperparameter of the model has been selected on the validation set. So you cannot use the final result here. You need another set which has not been used to test your model. And this is very, very important. And this is a classic error in machine learning where people, they forget about the testing set. They have a training set and validation set, and they optimize the hyperparameter of the validation set, and at the end they publish results, and they say, okay, we have these results. Okay, but no, you cannot do that. You need a testing set. So very, very important. Okay. So this is one way of doing the evaluation methodology. To have your data set, you divide your data set into 3 parts. And at the end, you compute your scores on the testing set. Question?
I do not really see the difference between the training set and the validation set.
Okay. But you have never used machine learning models? No. So it's a little bit difficult to understand. Okay. But your model, it has some parameters that you can tune. By changing some parameters of the model, it will not learn the same way. Okay. Imagine you have a model, it can learn from the data, but if you change the parameter, it not learns on the same way. So imagine you fix a set of parameters of your model, it learns on the data, then on the validation set, you compute some scores. But you say, okay, not too bad. But maybe by changing my parameter, it will learn a little bit differently and it will be a little bit better. So you change your parameter, you train again from scratch your model, but it has different parameters. So it's the same kind of model. So it's the same neural network, for instance, but as the parameters are a little bit different, it does not learn the same way. So at the end, it will not compute the same score. And so you can do that a lot of time. Once you think you have reached the best parameter of your model. But you have used a lot of times the validation set to select the best parameter of your model. So in a sense, it is you have biased your model, your scores. That's why you need a testing set, which has not been used to select the parameters. Is it a little bit more clear?
Yeah.
But then I think you will better understand that by doing the assignment. Okay. But it's like if you want to run, imagine if you change your shoes, the parameter are your shoes.
Yeah.
You know, in a sense, and you try to select the best shoes, always on the same track. So at the end, you tell me, okay, these are the base shoes, and I run 100 meters in less than 10 seconds, like Lucien Bolt. So you are very good. But I told you, no, because you select your shoes on the same track. So now go on that track. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And then you have a second evaluation methodology, which is called K-cross-fault validation. And it consists of dividing the dataset into K faults. So imagine 10 parts, for instance. If K is equals to 10, it will be 10-fold cross-validation. So imagine you have your dataset. So here it is in 5 parts. Let's say 5 parts. So you divide your dataset into 5 parts. Okay? And at the first iteration, you use these 4 parts of your model, 4 parts of the dataset, so to train the model. And this part is used for testing. You compute your score there. Okay? First run. Second run, now you use these 4 parts to train your model. And you compute your score here, and so on and so on. So at the end, it's like if you would have produced 5 different testing sets. Because the model has been trained differently on 5 different training sets. And this method is sometimes used when your data set is small. Because if the data set is small, you need, most of the time, a large part of the data to train the model. Because you need more data to train the model than to evaluate the model. So if your data set is really small, the testing set will be very, very small. And you cannot say that your result will be representative. Imagine you have only 2 months of data for UPV production. And if you use 1 month and 30 days for training and the last day for testing, okay, but your score are computed only on 1 day. So it was a sunny day. So what would be the model capacity if it was a cloudy day? You cannot say. So for small data set, most of the time you use that kind, because imagine now that you have only 2 months of data, and here it is only 1 day, and the rest is 1 month and 30 days. We have at the end like 5 days testing. Okay. But be careful here because it means that the parameter of the model does not change between the iterations. So it means the validation part that I have told before has already been done. You have already selected the best hyperparameter of the model when you do that. So you need, before that, so imagine maybe you have another part of the data where you try to optimize the parameters and so on, and at the end you can do that. But here, if you change the parameter between the iteration, it will not work. So once the strategy is set, how can we evaluate qualitatively the forecast? So imagine we have selected the first strategy or the second strategy, we don't care. And so at the end, we are on the testing set. So we use the testing set to do something to evaluate the forecast. What do you think we can do to evaluate qualitatively the forecast? It's easy, you can answer this. So yes, we use the testing part. We compute forecast on the testing part.
The last part, data set,
yes. Yes, so we use it. So now we have some forecast. So I compute some forecast on this part. But qualitatively, how can you judge or assess your forecast?
Compare it with the test. So we have the model for the test part. We see on regarde la qualité pour les tests faits et puis on compare ces qualités avec la qualité obtenue avec la partie des data. avait été fait. Et imaginons qu'on a testé la production solaire, on modifie ces paramètres. Sur nos tests, on obtient peut-être une valeur assez incroyable. Et puis on regarde sur la partie qu'on a exposée, on compare du coup les valeurs brutes qu'on a exposées et celles
aux observations alors.
Mais, donc c'est composé en trois parties.
Ouais, mais là c'est fait, on a déjà changé. Donc c'est OK, tu as déjà sélectionné tous tes paramètres, tu es sur le testing set, ton paramètre est fixé et tu dis je vais sur le testing set, c'est la dernière étape. J'ai ma prévision sur le testing set, donc tu as construit ta forecast, c'est fait, elle est là. Maintenant, comment tu juges si elle est de bonne ou de mauvaise qualité?
On regarde par rapport au paramètre maximum qu'on peut obtenir. Il y a un maximum théorique.
Maximum théorique de quoi? De production?
La production, par exemple. Il y a une limite physique.
Oui, OK. OK.
Okay.
So let's now come back in English. So you compute your forecast on the testing set. So you have your forecast. So one way of you can look if you over forecast, because as you say we have a physical law. So you cannot forecast 2 megawatts of production for a PV installation of maximum 500 kilowatts. So yes, that's an easy way to look at the forecast if the forecast is proper. So that could be one way of doing that. But there is another way, which is quite easy also. Imagine I give you some forecasts. What will be the first thing that you will do just to see if they are good or not?
You mean on the moment or afterwards?
I give you forecast. You have your model, it produces some forecasts. So you can see the PV production forecasted. Okay, like that. Okay.
Wait to see the forecasts are matching for you.
Yes, so you compare to the observation. Yes. But here we are simulating, so you already have the data in fact. So you have the data of the testing part, so you have the observation of the testing part. So you just compare the forecast to the observation. Yes, you just do that. Visually, you compare them. Does it fit or not? Because if the observations are like that and your forecasts are like that, it's okay, it's not good. So yes, it is the first thing to do. This is what I did there. Red observation, black forecast, So what do you think of these two? Are they good or are they bad? In your opinion, which one is the best? Yeah, right. So you, by just using your eyes, you can tell me this one is better than this one. So visually, you can assess if the forecasts are good or not. We just use our eyes. Visually, we compare to the observation. So here we see that there is a problem there and there. Something happened. The model was not capable of forecasting the PV production there and there. There was a cloud here and a cloud here, and the forecasting model did not see the clouds. Maybe it is not due to the forecasting model, because maybe it was the weather forecast that was not good there. Maybe the solar irradiation was not good because the weather forecast were saying, yeah, here there is some sun, and maybe it was not the case. So weather, in fact, it was the case. The weather forecast error most often drives the forecasting error. And so you have typical error that you can see with your own eyes. So here, for instance, are amplitude error. So this is what you said before. You can have a look at the level of production, and you know the maximum of production. So if it overshoots the maximum production, of course, there's a problem. But here, for instance, you have here the observation, and here you have the forecast, and you see that the shape is quite good, but there was a problem of amplitude. Something happened into the model because we don't know why, but something happened here. We have a problem of amplitude, so maybe we will need to correct it. But the shape was good, so we captured quite well the shape. And here we have a phase error. It's a little bit shifted in the right. Here we need something there. Here it was not so bad. And then we can try to do a little bit better, because we can use our eyes to assess forecasts, but then we can compute also some metrics, some scores to assess the forecast. So one way of doing that is just to compute the forecast error. So you just make the difference between the observation of the forecast. when there is a hat like that on a variable, it means that it is computed estimated, so it is a forecast. And when you do not have a hat, it means it is the observation. So you just make the difference between the observation and the forecast. So here it is a forecast, for instance, consumption, production, or whatever, that has been computed at t, time t, for time t plus k. This is what it means, the symbol. Here it is observation at the same time. So you make the difference, and you can, if you want, normalize that by, for instance, dividing it by the nominal installed capacity, and so like that we'll have an error in percentage. So this is the example for wind farm. So here you have the observation, so the straight black line, and the points here are the point forecast. So it is the opposite. The points are the observation, and here it is the forecast. And they computed the normalized error, just by making the difference. And so here you have the normalized error in terms of percentage between -1 and 1. And so you can see the error. And so which is there, this is where we have the main error. So you can see easily here, by computing that, you see, okay, in terms of percentage here, yes, the error here is like almost 50%. So it's quite huge. So we can do that. Do you know any other metrics that we could compute? So metric is a score. Do you know some kind of score you can compute? I'm sure you know one that you use for linear regression with Quentin Nouveau in Bachelor 2. Yes? Yes, the mean square error. For linear regression, you minimize the mean square error, if you remember well. You make the difference between your estimate and the observation. You computed the mean square error of that, so it was a metric, and you minimize the mean square error. And so the mean square error is a metric that you can use for point forecasting. Before you have the bias. The bias is only the average of the error. So you compute the average of the error of, for instance, for a day. So this is a bias. After that, you have the mean absolute error. So it is the average of the absolute error. And here you have the root mean square error. So the root mean square error is like the root of the mean square error. But you can also compute the mean square error. And so these are three simple metrics that you can use to assess your point forecast. And then you have also the normalized version. The normalized version is when you divide the metric, for instance, by the total installed capacity. So like that, at the end, you have a metric which is expressed in terms of percentage. So this is what I give you there. So here I have three models. I have a neural network, NLP means multi-layer perceptrons. I have a recurrent neural network, LSTM, which is a long short-term memory neural network. And I have here a Gaussian boosting regressor model. So I have three models. And here I computed the normalized mean absolute error, so the plain lines, and the normalized root mean square error, the dashed lines, for each model, for each quarter of the day. So this is a day with 96 quarters, and I computed these metrics for each one of the models. And so like that, I can compare directly the model. So here, for instance, I can see that the LSTM, the red one, you can see that for the normalized mean absolute error, it is smaller most of the time for each time than for the other model. And it is the same for the normalized root mean square error. You can see the red one here in dashed line comparing to the blue and the green one. So I can compute, for instance, this metric, and then visually I can see directly for this metric which model is the best. But yes, one comment. Even if for this day it seems that the LSTM model is the best, it does not mean that in reality it is the best forecast. It just means that for these metrics, for these two metrics, this is the best model. Okay. But it does not mean that at the end it will be the best forecast. You can never say this is the best forecast. You can just say this is the best forecast for this metric. it's like you, if you consider your grade, I cannot say you are the best student of this university. I can just say this is a student that got the best grade in the microgrid course, for instance. Okay. And for this kind of notes, grade, sorry, you know what I mean? So be careful about that. You cannot say this is the best forecast. You can just say this is a good forecast based on that metric, and that metric. But maybe if I consider other metrics, it will not be this model that will get the best scores. Okay. So be careful about that. And even at the end, you can have a model which perform very well for various types of metrics. You use this forecast in a decision-making model, and at the end, you do not take a good decision. So it does not mean that if a forecasting model is very good for some metrics, that at the end, it will produce, in a decision-making problem, good results. These are two different things. Here, we are only focusing on the quality assessment of the forecast. The quality assessment of the forecast is you use metrics to assess the quality of the forecast. And then for decision-making model, it's something else. We will see that in the next lecture. We want to assess the value of the forecast for some decision-making model. So you will need to consider a case study with a decision-making process and see if the forecast is good or not for that decision-making process. It will be the value of the forecast. Here we are only looking at the quality of the forecast. And you can say the quality of my forecasts are good based on that metric, and that metric. But it does not mean that the value of the forecast will be good. Okay. Small recap. Forecasting is a natural step for decision making, and we have some key parameters to forecast in microgrid. So the generation, the load, and the prices, for instance. What is a point forecast? A point forecast, in fact, it is the expectancy of a stochastic process. So we forecast the expectancy of a stochastic variable. So at the end, everything is, every variable in the world are stochastic variable. There is no, I do not know some perfect deterministic variable. It does not exist. But here it is a way of modeling a stochastic process as a deterministic variable is that we forecast directly the expectancy. So at the end, it will produce some point. So for each lead time, we are producing a point estimate by opposition to probability forecast. So for a given lead time, maybe a point forecast, we have point there with some probability. You see? So this is very important to have that in mind. And you produce a forecast based on what? On some information up to time t. So this is why we say conditional information up to time t, because we compute a forecast based on some information, and we use a model G. It could be a machine learning model, a statistical model, and so on. In terms of evaluation strategy, keep in mind that you can have two different methodologies. The first one, when you have a big data set, the widely used methodology is to divide the data set in three parts: a training part, validation part, and the testing part. You do your iteration between training and validation. Once you get the base parameter of your model, at the end, you compute the scores on the testing set. If your data set is small, maybe you will prefer this one, where you can virtually demultiply your testing set and get a bigger testing set. In terms of metrics, quantitative metrics for assessing the quality of the point forecast, most of the time we compute the mean absolute error and the root mean square. And sometimes it is expressed in terms of percentage because we have normalized them by a capacity factor. Here are some references if you want to start with the topic. Here are some online lectures from Pierre Persson, which is really the best guide for forecasting in Europe. And they are open access, so just look at the link, you will see there are several modules. They are very good. He also gave a lecture at the DTU during the summer school about that. There is also a book, but I don't think we will do this one. And if you want on forecasting, I also have my thesis there, which is in open access. And in fact, I base a lecture on that. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.